Hey everyone, good morning. My name is Laura Schreiber. I'm a policy organizer with the Land Stewardship Project. I'll get into a little bit more about LSP in a second. But thank you for joining us on our session around how we can use policy for good and how to make systems work for both people and the land. So today we're going to get into a little policy 101, if you will, but it'll be fun, I promise. And Peter and I are going to give some examples of work that we've done with our organizations that actually involve you all in this process, and have a little group activity of thinking through what are solutions that we all can bring together and bring forward to help, support systems change on a landscape. So there will be some people getting up, talking to one another, so I hope you had some coffee. And can kick it over to Peter, though, to tell us a little bit more about Friends of the Mississippi River.
Sure, yeah, we probably should have scheduled the audience interaction part for after lunch or something like that. But anyway, we'll go ahead with it. Again, my name's Peter LaFontaine. I'm the Ag Policy Manager at Friends of the Mississippi River, which is a metro-based group that works on a bunch of different but related issues: land conservation, land use and planning, education, particularly youth education, and my program, Water, which all tie together to try and boost the health of the Mississippi River, not just in the metro, but also across the basin and down to the Gulf. So we have been engaged with agricultural work for years now, but are coming to a pretty clear focus on what we call continuous living cover agriculture. Many of you are probably familiar with it in different forms, different names, but essentially keeping living roots in the ground year-round, which ties in really well with what all of you are doing, harnessing the power of perennials to make poultry production more sustainable.
Awesome. Yeah, and a little bit more about Land Stewardship Project. So we're a grassroots membership-based nonprofit. We've been around since the 80s, and our mission is really about stewarding both healthy soil, land, and community, and we do that through a variety of different programs. So I sit on our policy team. We work at this local, state, and federal level, pushing for policy that is transformative for our communities and really has sustainability at the heart of everything that we do. We also have our programs team where we do beginning farmer training programs. So some of you might have heard of our beginning farmer programming that we do. We've had hundreds of people go through that and become new farmers, so really supporting the next generation of farmers. Our soil health program has farm-to-farmer networks and soil health hubs and field days, so really trying to share out the knowledge and the impact that building our soil can have for both farmers, bottom line, but also obviously our environment and continuing farming. And then lastly, we have our food systems work and then land access. So helping folks who are trying to become the next generation of farmers and also transitioning out farmers who are looking to pass on their land and do it in a sustainable way. So, yeah. Okay, so we wanted to start this session imagining where is our food system currently at? And would love a little audience participation. When you think of our current food system, what is some of the things that come to mind for you? And we can just have people shout it out.
And Diane said answers will be rewarded with $1,000 each, so don't just bring them on up.
What was that? Broken. Yeah. Extraction. Mm-hmm. Polluted. Yeah, some images that we have up here. A poultry system that is incredibly extractive and harmful to both people and the land. Monocropping, Gulf of Mexico is a dead zone. We have an incredibly fragile food system. COVID-19 really exposed what a lot of us knew, but brought it to the greater public mindset, barren grocery stores, and pesticide use. It's not super great. So that's our current-ish system. We know there's pockets of really awesome things happening. So wanting to imagine, what would we like our food system to look like? What would we like this to look like in 5 to 10 years or long-term vision? What are some words that come to mind for you all? Local? Yep, awesome.
Return.
Reciprocal. Vibrant, love that.
Nutrient dense.
Nutrient dense, yes.
Diverse.
What was that one?
Diverse.
Diverse, yep.
Respects human rights. Collaborative.
Beautiful, collaborative, yeah. So these are some photos I threw up. Yeah, diverse farms that are growing more than one crop on acres of land. Soil health, nutrient dense, grazing, animals out on the land, not within confined operations, and community. Yeah, awesome. Well, wanted to give a little framing of, okay, here's the type of system that we're looking to build, but we also live in a political dynamic, a political system. So wanted to give a little context for Minnesota. So Minnesota actually has a lot of power when you think about our political agriculture system. So at the federal level, we have a number of Congress people who are on the Senate and House Ag Committee, decide like where money flows and goes. And at the state level, you have an awesome champion in this area with Representative Christy Purcell.
Who's she talking to right now?
I think you know her, Peter.
That's my wife.
Yeah. Yeah, so wanted to give a little context of we can make change at both local, state, and federal level, and especially within Minnesota, we really have ample opportunity to do so. And for this current political moment, and this right now, if you don't know it, there's a state legislative session happening, and there's a lot of money on the table. There's like 17.56 billion dollars, which is a lot of money to fund the type of things that we're talking about. How to take care of our communities, how to take care of our soil, make sure our farmers can earn a living wage and grow food for people that's nutritious and going to be nourishing. So as we're thinking about later in our exercise of like what are the possibilities for change, in Minnesota, we have an awesome opportunity this year, so we can get into more details there. But I'm just going to give a brief example of some policy work that LSP has led, and then Peter's going to dive into something hopefully you all heard about yesterday, the Value Chain Development Fund. So so like I said, LSP is a grassroots organization. We are member-led, so that means really actually going out and talking with people on the ground who are living these issues day in and day out. We really believe that, if we're looking to change systems, we need to go to the people that are actually interacting with it, that know intimately the answers. So this past fall, we gearing up for the legislative session and going out to our members and asking them, what does LSP need to work on? What is most urgent right now for you? So we went and did listening sessions, we did surveys, really trying to talk with people and see where they're at, what they need. And one area that we focused on was meat processing. So talking with processors, producers all across the state. One of our organizers, Sarah Goldman, probably had more than 50 one-to-ones on this. So really trying to understand what are the issues that people are facing. And with that came out, distilling all these conversations and bringing together a team of LSP members to help guide and lead our work. Decided that two things would be really impactful to bring forward for policy. So something that we heard time and time again is there actually are people who want to be processors in Minnesota, which is great because we need more small and local processors because as you sure all know, we don't have a lot available right now. So having a position at MDA to help with the licensing and the permits and food safety plans, that would actually free up so much capacity to be able to bring new processors online. Secondly, would be the average age right now of process business owners is around 60. So you have a whole workforce that will be retiring and transitioning out. How are we building up that new generation? So having mini grants to help with business planning, food safety, handling, that kind of thing, so we can like have resources for folks to be part of the solution. So that was some of the, going out to community, asking what do you need, bringing team together, and then having a policy intervention, and then bringing it into a bill. We had Greg Werchke, he owns Clean Kitchens & Co., so he has one of the only mobile units in Minnesota, so was testifying for the need for more processor training grants and that kind of thing. And then, like I mentioned, Sarah Goldman also testified, so kind of showing that whole spectrum of starting from going out to the community to actually having that process being heard in front of the House Ag Committee. So, yeah.
Great.
Here you are.
Thanks, Laura. Laura's a terrific resource if you have questions afterward about grants, pretty much across the spectrum of what LSP does.
Farmland, all that good jazz.
Don't hesitate to reach out to her on the weekends and all that stuff. In my presentation, I'm going to outline how we, which includes some of the folks in this room, as well as Laura and LSP, helped to create a pilot program to build an industry around that term I called earlier, continuous living cover approach to agriculture, so perennial and quasi-perennial systems. I personally am not jaded enough yet. I still see government as a pretty key player in helping to bridge the gap between interesting concepts like perennial grain, kernza there, for example, and viable commercial enterprises. This is a concept that's pretty common to new businesses that some of you may be familiar with. You have an idea, you start to spin it up, you create some product lines, you iron out the kinks, and all this time you are spending money to establish yourself in the market, right? So you're sort of over toward the left side of that curve. It takes a while for most businesses to make money, and that whole time, it's really easy to find yourself stuck in the bottom in that valley of death, which is a hyperbolic but probably pretty accurate way of characterizing it when you're down in there. And you're looking up at break even. So this is where outside capital from any number of sources is really important. Let's see here, does that autoplay or do I need to, oh, that's okay. It's a silent video of a guy walking his fields, which is pretty nice. In agriculture and in food systems, as you all know, there are really high barriers to introducing new products into the marketplace. And most businesses and growers aren't really willing or able to hang out in that valley of death for any real time while the demand for these new products starts to build in that marketplace. Same goes for the value chain companies that are so integral to this work, the processors, the distributors, the food product manufacturers. So we really do have a chicken and egg problem, right? We have growers or poultry producers who want to know that they have a market that they can sell their goods into. But food companies typically don't want to commit to something until they know it can scale, until they've worked out all the kinks on their end, and they just don't want to commit to uncertain conditions. So who goes first, right? It's really important to sequence this stuff correctly, which is where Laura and Diane and, like I said, a couple of other folks in this room and I have been working to move forward the prospects for a handful of novel crops that work in these CLC, continuous living cover systems. Basically trying to figure out that sequencing approach. I'm going to click through the next couple of slides because we're running behind, but essentially what you're going to see is there are a lot of good ideas and a lot of things that need to take place before these industries and companies can really establish themselves. These are just some of the things that are necessary to get these crops off the ground. And we've got a little formatting issue, but these are quotes, again, I'm going to click through quickly, that essentially all say the same thing from entrepreneurs across the system. Basically, we have some really good ideas, but we need help. So this is where we come in. This continuous living cover value chain development fund is something that has its origins a couple of years ago. Some of our commercial coalition partners got together and said, hey, how do we actually leverage government to help us out in a field that's not always so forgiving? They did the first legwork of reaching out to their legislators, reaching out to groups like ours, and saying, how do we actually get this off the ground? And somebody had a good idea. Why don't we just model it on something that already exists? In this case, the Minnesota Renewable Development Fund, which has played a pretty strong role in helping to get our renewable energy sector in the state going. So these, again, Senator Aaron Murphy there in the middle, many of you probably know some of the guys from Perennial Pantry, the Kernza distributor, and other colleagues, started talking through how do we actually do this. So we pulled together a coalition of businesses, of NGOs, advocates like myself, and proposed, after a lot of wrangling among ourselves, like what do we actually need here? What would it actually get the trick done? How do we manage to navigate the waters of the Minnesota legislative process? We came up with this idea called the CLC, Value Chain Development Fund. We originally proposed an ask of $10 million, which would go a long way toward standing up these industries. We talked to the governor's staff, we talked to MDA, we talked to legislators across the board, and really started to gin up some bipartisan support. People on the Republican side of the aisle were really drawn to the rural development aspects, to the idea of helping small businesses, revitalizing rural communities. The DFL was very interested in all those things. They also cared about the environmental and public health implications of standing up these industries. So ultimately, in what was really a very difficult session, we wound up with a pretty notable success. We got enough funding for a pilot project, $500,000, which again, not $10 million, but it's quite a good success considering the circumstances. That has just in the last couple of weeks been finalized by MDA, Minnesota Department of Agriculture. They've put out their grant proposal process and will be soliciting, or are soliciting, and will be reviewing proposals over the next couple of weeks. So I'll get to the how to apply at the end, but something that all of you should definitely look into. Let's see here. So yeah, this is supposed to say something like navigating the choppy waters of Minnesota politics. All the problems that we had to overcome. I do not want to undersell how difficult this can be. At the very last minute, we had the turkey growers lobbyists put some pretty heavy pressure behind the scenes on our Republican sponsors to axe regenerative poultry from the bill because they were concerned about what it would mean for the avian influenza implications. We had to push back against that, work with RAA and others to come up with some genuine solutions to that problem, and managed to get regenerative poultry in there at the end, albeit not specifically referenced, but we talked about elderberry and hazelnut, which is, that's sort of the way you're getting here. There was a problem. Legislators didn't quite understand how it was different from the academic funding for Forever Green, where a lot of these crops are being developed. We had to do a lot of work to try and keep those things separate. But again, we got $500,000 in our first try, which is, I think pretty remarkable. So again, the grant application process is open now. I would be happy to connect with any of you. I think we have some handouts somewhere. I'll talk to Diane to make sure that they're placed prominently, and this was also the subject of a presentation yesterday from, I think, Margaret Wagner at MDA. But by all means, reach out to me. We would love to help you get government money. I'm going to skip the questions for now because, like I said, we're a little bit behind. But we do have this group activity, so I hope you've slugged some coffee down. We are going to ask people to move around during this and form small groups. Don't worry about if you know folks. We'll give you a couple of minutes to introduce yourself. So just at this point, if you could all stand up, sort of get together in groups of 4 or 5, no more than, say, 7. And just find a place where you can be a little bit distant from your nearest group in proximity. And then we'll get into the instructions. We'll give you 15 seconds to find a group. And don't be hesitant to spread out around the room. All right, I need a champagne flute here to clink. If you could turn your attention back toward us for just a sec. We're going to walk through the instructions here. So this is a process that you might have heard of, variously referred to as issue cutting or policy chopping, or any number of things. Basically, it's trying to boil down a very big problem to a smaller and more manageable solution. So what the point of this activity is, we're going to figure out how to solve all of the problems facing regenerative poultry in the next 30 minutes. Right? That'll be very easy. We'll get it done. No problem. Job done. No, but essentially, how this is going to look is we're going to ask each of your groups to get together for a couple of minutes and just start lobbing out, what are some of the big barriers facing the regenerative poultry community? These can be regulatory. They can be commercial. For the purposes of this exercise, let's try and stay away from the cultural elements, just because those can be, although huge and relevant and very important to tackle, maybe we don't have time to get into them in the next half hour. And the legislature might not have as big a toehold to solve some of these cultural problems. So regulatory, financial, or something else entirely if you want. So what are those barriers that, if we were to overcome them, would really start to get regen poultry going in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Start to think on some different but not generational timescales here. Your group is going to come to some consensus, pick one shorter term barrier and one longer term barrier that needs to be overcome. And if you can, it's not urgent that you do so, but if you can have a solution, that would be good to be able to throw out when we're starting to come back together as a group. We will then come back together as a group. We'll share out what our groups discussed so that all of you can sort of hear what everybody else is thinking. And in that period, if somebody says, I actually have a solution to this barrier that I want to contribute, we'll log those too. And then we're going to do a ranking exercise that's basically, it's very, very basic, right? Does this take a lot of effort? Does this take not very much effort? Is it going to have a lot of impact or not very much impact? And typically what you want to see with these sort of exercises is the stuff that's in the brown boxes up there. Those are the things that we want to think about first. They're the ones that don't take a ton of effort, that have a high impact. Doesn't mean you can't operate in the other places, particularly the blue. Or rather, not the blue. You want to stay away from putting in a lot of effort and not getting much out of it. But all this stuff is fair game. Some of it has more relevance to the early years. Some of it has more relevance to the later years. So I'm going to go around to each of the groups, hand out a little, we've got this big screen up here. You can all look at the big screen. If you have questions, Laura and I will be sort of moseying around. Feel free to ask. But take the next, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
How are we doing on time?
Yeah, I think next 10 minutes or so, and feel free if this room gets crazy loud, and you can go into the hallway, but just make your way back after 10 minutes, I'd say. Yeah.
And don't worry about finding the perfect solution to these things.
Yeah.
We will be working with you afterward as well. So get to it. Feel free to ask us any questions that you might have.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so the next phase of this exercise, we're going to take what you've been talking about. We're going to start to synthesize some of these ideas and have a little bit more of a larger group conversation. Laura is kindly going to take some notes for us so that we don't lose all this stuff. And we're going to try and put some virtual sticky notes up on our impact effort chart for you. Bear with us if it doesn't quite work out. We're sort of figuring out the technology on the fly. But we'll try and make sure to capture all these ideas. And there will be follow-up. When Laura and I said we wanted to work with you guys in the future, very much a live offer. We're always looking for good and productive ideas to spin up. And the legislature keeps on moving. So there's going to be another opportunity before you know it to actually move some of these ideas into policy proposals, hopefully into actual policy that gets you what you need. So again, the idea here is we are going to have one person from each group, the unlucky member who has been designated to share out, and put yourself in the limelight for just a minute, to share your one major barrier that you've identified that's long-term and one that's short-term. And then if you have any solutions attached to that, by all means, let us know. If you're hearing that and you say, hey, you know what, a key solution here is XYZ, feel free to shout that out too. Don't shout it out, just raise your hand, we'll call on you. Can I get a volunteer from the first group who wants to go? First one's always the easiest, no pressure. Mirage. is the, and for others, if you just want to stand up, it's a small enough room, you can probably shout.
All right, good morning, folks. So our group actually talked about a few different things, but I'll share the sort of top two things that we talked about. One of the big barriers that we talked about was land access. And something that we discussed was actually that this is a huge barrier, but that there's a lot of opportunities with this one as well. We're actually undergoing one of the largest land tenure transitions in this country over the next 10 to 20 years. And so there are huge issues with land succession. There are already farmers who are anticipating transitioning their land. And so this is a ripe opportunity for government to really step in and provide some guidance and some, perhaps even some opportunities for land to be transitioned to BIPOC farmers, to farmers who don't have access to land, and to really address some of these systemic inequities. Public land access is another piece of this, where we could really be addressing land access for farmers through creating better programs that allow for public lands to be used for farming, for instance. And then the other one that we talked about was de-risking through investment and insurance. One thing we talked about was incentivizing investors for directing funds towards regenerative and organic systems. And another thing that we discussed was regulating insurance companies, or kind of a crop insurance overhaul or equivalent support for regenerative systems. Somebody mentioned like flock insurance. So yeah, those were our two.
Very cool. Thanks, Mirage. Next one up, it can be, that was a great description, but if you just want to keep it short, that's fine too. So again, no pressure. Yes?
One short-term issue we talked about was just money for more equipment and staff capacity. A long-term issue is the red tape of tribal members being able to sort of access tribal land and use it for these purposes.
Did you catch that, Laura? Would you just say that a little louder for Laura in the back? I think that the tribal access.
Regulations of how tribal members can access their own land for these purposes.
You good? Great. And we're going to probably put these sticky notes on willy-nilly, so don't worry about where they are. We're not making snap judgments yet. Any volunteers for group 3? Yes.
We talked about farmers getting paid like what they deserve based on like what they're doing for the poultry system, and really wanting like the government subsidy for this, in the sense that like we thought corn and soybeans wouldn't be successful for producers if they weren't getting a government subsidy. So why can't we have the same thing for poultry?
Fair enough. And if folks are hearing these barriers and want to propose a different solution, just pipe up. Next volunteer. And any proposed solutions? I mean, there's some that sort of suggest themselves right away. A capital investment program for school lunches or something like that, or a farmer outreach and education component to MDA's work.
Well, I would say on the school side.
And the hurdle there being, what is regen ag, right? Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Even sustainable ag.
Great. Speak up just a little for Laura.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. So we talked about listening sessions for among the immigrant community to really identify the sort of unique barriers that don't, are considered under their models high risk.
Great. Yeah, just the small stuff, right? Yeah, that's terrific. A lot there. Any other groups that haven't gone yet? Or are we, okay. Speak up just a little bit. Yeah.
I'll try.
Thanks. I know it's early.
Our group made a connection, so we were talking a lot about financing and some of the barriers there. Then we started talking about developing processing and like actual industrial areas and centers. I represent a community, and we actually made a connection that I think is going to help us get creative and help them fund future projects.
Awesome. Awesome.
So our group talked a little bit about just kind of instilling confidence at the
farmer level, especially on those that are
not too far away. Tree Ridge happened to be over here on my left. So, you know, with everybody coming together, I hope we can move forward and find a path to make it all happen for all of us.
Hear, hear. Great, yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Diane, am I getting the boot at 10:15?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to go quick. I want to reiterate that this is, we are not, in fact, solving all the problems facing our community, but this is a first step, and it's sort of an introduction to how we start to think about these things and just bounce ideas off each other and say, oh, you know what, that's actually a problem for me too, but maybe I know someone who can help out. So typically what we would do, and maybe, you know, we've got a minute and a half left, right? Let's just try and do something real quick. Did anything that anybody said to you, either a barrier that you think you can, you know, propose a quick and dirty and easy solution for, or a solution that somebody proposed, leap out as really belonging in that beige brown box, something that's high impact, and we can work on it soon and we can get it done pretty easily.
Just quickly, that it was mentioned in school procurement. The city of Minneapolis has adopted the Good Food Purchasing Policy, which is a national initiative that's been going on for a decade in over 60 major institutions across the country. And so there's a whole value-based procurement system that has a lot of capacity around it. Center for Good Food Purchasing, local coalitions across the country, and there was a Twin Cities coalition for a while. It's kind of gone dormant, but I know that Bertrand Weber is still implementing that at Minneapolis Public Schools.
Okay, if anybody didn't catch all that, this is your man after the presentation. Anything else, and particularly things that, you know, we could use money, we could use a new program, we could use a new staffer that the state can help out with, that Laura and I can then work on next session.
So we talked a little bit about the idea of sort of community navigators to, when there is more money and more programs in play, connect people to the programs that they're eligible for. And in particular, like was mentioned before, those folks being bilingual or bicultural and understanding, being able to make the connections within the immigrant communities, Latino communities, BIPOC communities that are often pretty isolated from the rest of the resources. So.
Yeah, there's actually an opportunity like right now to support what you're talking about. So some of you might be familiar with the Emerging Farmer Office at MDA. Lillian Otiano, she is a powerhouse of one, and we're hoping to get her more staff. So right now, actually, at the legislature, there's proposal to bring on 4 more full-time staff, and then hopefully have more like part-time and community liaisons, basically, of what you're talking about. But legislators need to hear from people of like what kind of impact that would have. Like they can hear it from Peter and I, but it really makes a huge, like a way more impactful statement when they have producers and growers talking directly to them, like, this is what I need. So if you're interested in like, well, how do I have that conversation? Like, please come up to me and I'd be really happy to connect you and be a resource for you, because that is something that's on the table right now. So we need to make sure it happens, so yeah.
Diane is shocking our battery packs right now, so we're going to get off the stage. We'll be around for a little while. I think you should have our contact info. We would love to hear from you and work with you in the months and years ahead. So thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
Oh, and Diane. Oh, yes. For that Continuous Living Cover Grant Program, I have a bunch of handouts, web applications only for this one, so I'm going to leave them. Where should they be?
Maybe just right out the door, there's a table on the left.
Okay. And if you have questions about it, come talk to me.
Yeah. Oh, real quick though, land access came up a lot, and there is going to be a grant open again in July for the Farmland Down Payment Assistance Program. If you have questions on that, I'm working pretty closely on it, so I'd be happy to connect and be a resource too. So, okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.